you're happy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to week 3, the halfway point already of our level 1 of Spinal Art. Our series of art classes kindly sponsored by Rethink Ireland. So, how did you get on? Did you get a chance to experiment with drawing and texture? And I've gotten lots of pictures already, so that's great because I'm starting a gallery to document our creations online. And it also enables me to visually see how you're getting on and I suppose talk to people individually about what they're creating. And that's my number there so that you can send me photos of your experiments. And I practiced my cuboids, my 3D rectangles with 2-point perspective. And I find this a really good exercise to kind of train my brain. And the first time I do it, the lines are always wonky. So these guidelines, taking them from the 2 points you see left and right, and drawing the red lines forward, really help me firm up the shape of the cuboid. So definitely something worth doodling and practicing. It's kind of a form of brain training, really, because we have to disrupt our brain enough to say, actually, stop inventing the cube and let's look at getting those lines parallel. This is page 1 of my gallery of this week. A few journal pages that I got through on WhatsApp. Collages, we see the shapes. I love seeing everybody's different hands, because hands are really the enablers for all our creative work out in our eyes. So it's great to be able to see how everybody handles color and texture and shape. Another few pages here I got from Gemma, Susan. Oh, sorry, I didn't read out the names there, but Rena, Elizabeth, and Breda sent me these selection through. And Gemma, Susan McKeever, Tig, and Hughes and Tim sent me this collection. So you can see lots of variety across the material, from water soluble backgrounds, water paint, pencil, more solid blocks of color and texture. There's a bit of paint splatter there as well. And I think they're Tig's characters climbing over his shape, which shows great personality there too. Some additional collages by Karen, Kathy, Rena, and Claire. And I may have put Claire's name in the wrong place. She might be on level 2. Something. Some of the cube experiments done, fantastic to see, and a Mondrian inspired work from the cubes. So definitely keep hitting me up with those photos. They really do encourage me. They're kind of like the currency. I feel like very rewarded seeing the photos come through and zooming in on them and seeing how you're handling line. And yeah, it's a kind of good indicator if the material we're covering is appropriate as well. I love the dice there and the Rubik's Cube. I think the first time the Rubik's Cube came out, it was stickers, which I managed to pick all off and replace so it looked or appeared like I had completed the cube, which I hadn't. So this week, we're going to look at some colour and composition. And I think colour says so much about us. Even down to, oh, what mood am I in? That's the colour jumper I'll wear today. So what colours are we drawn to? Colour can reflect our mood. And we can also assign colours to times and places and indeed emotions as well. So for this exercise in colour and composition, we're going to need our journal, oil pastels, watercolour paints, a water jar, brushes, glue, scissors, and a pencil or pen. And you can kind of go 4 or 5 pages into your journal or tear one out, because I think I've tore one out. So it'll be easier for me to move around, because we will be working with it differently and turning it into a series of smaller paintings. So to start, we're going to get out the oil pastels and we're going to choose 3 or 4 oil pastels and make lines and shapes just to divide the page. And we're not looking at getting any form in, or we don't want the lines to look like anything. We're just going to work across them. And I do like an old diagonal marker too, because it stops everything from getting too flat and it introduces movement. So I'm going to pick some colors. I'll go with a different set of colors for myself today. And I'll go maybe with a light blue. So I have picked a purple, a blue, and a green. So you don't have to copy what's there, but definitely work across the page diagonally. So the two pink marks that go from one corner down into the other corner, good diagonal marks. So I'm going to use my light blue with that instead. You can't beat an X. It definitely creates a good bit of movement. You can overlap some of those lines. Or you could take one of the lines for a walk and move it all around the page. And don't even assign a top or bottom to the page. So make these marks free. Don't try and organize them and allow them to overlap. You can cut across the page with diagonal lines. So oil pastels are essentially posh crayons. And they're made with wax. So they will resist a water-based paint, which we're going to add at the next stage. And we're going to apply the paint on. So just for a quick minute, I'll stop the share and just show you up close what my page is looking like. So that's what my page is looking like. I did two kind of giant triangle-y things, a bit of a purple line for a walk, and an X in blue diagonal line. So that's how we're looking so far. And I'll just hop back to the share. No right or wrong with this at all. We just want a good divided up page. So the next slide. So our watercolor paints, they're always a bit dry because it's been a while since we used them. So we're going to, once you have your background done with the oil pastels, we'll move the oil pastels over to one side for a bit. And I'm going to swap over to my paint. Get my brush handy. And I'm going to start blocking in a little bit of color across my oil pastels. So I'm going to wake up the color and I'm going to use my large brush to apply the paint. So that could be your rectangular one, or if you have a larger one in your collection, you can use that too. So I'm just dampening the brush and choosing a color, and then I'm going to swirl the brush 20 or 30 times really in the oil or into the paint so that I can really see the pigment go up the hairs of the brush. If you don't do this enough, the effect you're going to get is technically dirty water. So you really want paint, and you can dilute the paint down with water once it hits the page, you know, if you want to make a lighter tone. So just like there in figure 1, you can place the color over the pastel. It's going to resist because it's made of wax. So I'm going to start putting on some color, and I'm not going to go too heavy with the water because I want some nice strong color about the place. And yeah, distribute that color around and use maybe different shapes to apply the color into. You could have a geometric shape, or you could have a line of color and start layering it up. So oil pastel is going to resist in the same way that maybe batik, if you're familiar with that, drawing with wax on fabric and then it's dyed, and at different stages the dye will take to different parts of the fabric. So it's a bit like a form of, and if you do a blob which you don't like, you can always use kitchen roll or something like that to blot it off. So I'll quickly flip around again to show my working desk. And I'm just going to apply just my light so that you're no glare. Yeah, and hopefully that's on a big enough screen that you can get some value from it. You may need to move to speaker view if you can't see me big enough. And I'll waffle on. I'm just going to layer up my colour till I don't see any more of the white on the page. And because they're water-based, they should dry pretty quickly. Yeah, you can restrict your palette if you want and just kind of keep a limited few colours, or else you can go hell for leather. Just throwing a bit of purple in here. I need something brighter. Might go with some yellow, and I can feel that's quite dry, so I'll keep agitating that for a little bit to wake it up. So using the oil pastel as the drawn element is a great way of sketching and then adding washes of colour on. So even if you had coloured paper, you could work with the oil pastel on, and you could just wash the colour on afterwards. Because my page is loose, I can kind of turn it around to work on. Some of the colours may run into each other, might be a bit of a happy accident. It's pooling in places as well. So if it's not strong enough, I can always maybe dry it and go back over. So we had our few drawn lines with our oil pastel, and now we're blocking in shades of colour. I think I'll go with a bit more orange. And the less water that you use with the paint, the more concentrated pigment of colour that you'll get then. So if you feel you need to dry between stages, you can. I'm just going to aim at filling in my page with colour, and then I'm going to hit it with the hairdryer for a minute. And then I'll revisit and see, do I need any more finishing touches? this corner. Put some dark blue in. Okay, that's quite damp now. So what I'm going to do is, that's how it's looking. I won't hold it up too tight in case I get too many runs, which kind of nice effect, but not one I'm looking for at the minute. So I'm just going to mute myself so you don't have to listen to the hairdryer. And I was chatting away with my mute button on. God. So I was just going back over some areas that are a bit pasty, and I covered some white oil pastel, and I'm going to just go back in. So there's some white oil pastel here, and I'm just going to go back over to make some of the background paint a bit darker, just to give me a bit of contrast, make it a bit more exciting, because you do need areas of dark in a painting to bring a bit of depth. So I often use brown or blue for this, because they're good colors that will tone with a lot of things. Do a bit of brown. And that'll just bring up some of my oil pastel details a little bit sharper. So you can see here, there's not that much contrast on that, whereas running the brown right over it again brings it out a little clearer, adding a bit of drama. And because of the resist, the shape will be nice and clear. So yeah, a few more dark areas and then I'll stop fiddling. Once that page is covered and you've a few drawn elements in there, we can move on to the next stage. But before we do any drawing or cutting, we will want that page to be bone dry. So whether it involves wafting it in the air or something similar, now a little bit more yellow and then so I can layer yellow over some of the green areas if they're a bit flat. That will give me a little bit more tone. And we're working here with essentially an abstract composition of sorts. And we're further going to abstract it by reducing it into different sizes. So that's how it's looking at the minute. It's giving me 80s t-shirt vibes or 80s shell suit. And I'm just going to give this a quick dry and then we can move back to screen share. Now, what I'm going to do before I move to the next stage of this, I'm going to take a photo before I alter this in any more in any shape or form. And if you have a fairly bulky cover on your phone, it never really takes a good photo. It'll always give you impaired light. So I try and hover over directly. I'll just tap the screen before I hit. And that'll make it go in focus. Right. So I've taken a photo for my reference. Back to screen share. So what are we going to do with this thing? Say, well, before we get too attached to these compositions, I want to introduce what I'm going to call a circular object. So we're going to use the circular object as a viewfinder. Now that could be the inside of a roll of tape, or it could be a little round roll. So something you can see through. I actually think the lid of the glue pot is a good one. So I'm going to take that off and just make sure that I have no glue in there that's going to stick on my hand. So I'll give it a little wipe. And I'm going to use the circle as a viewfinder. And this is going to give us what I call fresh perspectives. So if the whole page is our macro, our wide view, the round lid is going to give us a little micro view of the painting. And with the clear lid, at least you can kind of move it around and see ones that kind of catch your eye. And you can move around to see interesting compositions. And anything that divides up what you're seeing, whether it's an X or a little you can't go wrong with diagonals. They really work so well in composition. So I'm going to do that and spend a little time looking, and maybe I'll be able to identify a few circles. And I'm not going to do it like end up with a row of 6. They could be all over the place. We don't want to approach this in straight lines, because we want to look at each view as a separate little painting. So it's a bit like when you were smaller and you'd make a telescope out of the tin foil or the kitchen roll tube. The toilet roll tube was probably, I don't think there was kitchen roll tubes in my day. Yeah, so I'm ready to commit to one or two of them, and then I'll see what's left. I'm going to get myself a pencil for this. Is that a pencil? No. Yeah, here we go. And I'm going to identify one or two of them across my page. I'll stop the share so you can just kind of follow along what I'm doing with here's my lid. And I'm picking one or two because I like the way the lines divide up in the page. And I'll just start with one. And then I'll commit to it and draw around it. And that is my first circle. So I've decided I'll take that view there. It'll be easier to see when I cut it out. And you can't beat if something's a little off center. If something's too centered, we find it too boring. So I'll cherry pick my favorite views and then see what's left. Because I'll have all this in between stuff as well. So if I get 5 circles that I kind of like, I'll be happy with that. I might even get a few bonus ones. I'm like, oh. Okay, so I've picked 5, and then I'll have a look at my scrap once I'm happy with that. But just to talk through the next little stage of the process, I'll go back to my page. So when you're happy with the circular view that you've selected, draw around the lid with your pencil. Now, if the page isn't already out of your journal, probably helps to tear it out at this stage. And then we'll cut out each of those circles. And then we're going to review what they look like. So I'm going to grab my scissors. and get cutting. Okay, with my scissors. And I think the lid of the glue pot is a good size because from a scale point of view, you can get a couple off that journal page. And we'll be hanging on to whatever's left over because we'll put that to use in some other shape or form. So I find this methodology, often you walk into a great way of considering abstraction. And, what abstraction is really, it's just a series of lines and shapes and colors and textures. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean anything, but sometimes the patterns that we make as individuals relate to us in some shape or form. I often find myself replicating old Neolithic marks that you might see on Nouth and Doubt, and actually, it's the same sort of symbols that children will draw when they're younger. I think it's our natural visual language, and I find it very interesting and a very freeing way to connect with yourself creatively. These marks that we make intrinsically as people. I also love to use symbols and shapes in my work. They become a little visual language in themselves. And I often have seasons where, I'm totally vibing spirals right now, and it's all about the spiral or the infinity sign or series of concentric circles. And I recently learned that the concentric circles that appear on the stones of Doubt and Nouth actually relate to the generations of clan or family that may have spent time in these ancient places. And I think that's a lovely way of understanding a family tree as a set of concentric circles. And the more generations that are born, the bigger the collection of circles becomes. So that's a little bit of my Neolithic mark making obsessions coming into the class. So I have some leftovers, but I'm going to hang on to them. They won't be thrown away. I'll have a little look, see maybe if I can get another circle out of one or two sections. I might squeeze one out of this corner. Yeah, sure, why not? Okay, pencil. I'll do another one of those. I'll stop share so that you can see where my table is at and where it's looking at. I have a bit of scrap left. I'm going to see if I can get another circle out of that corner. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cut out at the minute. Yeah, I'm big into the infinity sign, which is like the number 8 on its side. It seems to be following me around at the minute. So I snuck one in here. I'm going to draw around that, and I think that's it. I might get another circle out of this piece of paper. So if I sat down and intentionally tried to compose an abstract painting in one sitting, I find I get a little bit contrived about what an abstract painting should look like, and it ends up too linear or too organized. Whereas what we have now are a set of 5 or 6 little abstract paintings that we've created ourselves by just working and cutting and changing how we view. And already I know which one I kind of like from this, and I don't know why I like it, but maybe it's the color, maybe it's the lines. And I think that's really interesting way of having a conversation with our creativity too. So I really like this one because it kind of looks like a bit of a body, and there's some earthy tones in the background, a little bit of green, some pink. I have this one which has a kind of an X and a loop in it, and a little bit of orange. So I can imagine if these were larger pieces, they would work very well on the wall. This one might work quite well too, though this is quite a dominant shape of a triangle, so maybe it's a little bit too, not quite sure. This one's like a kind of an X. It looks like those promotional, the ribbons for cancer awareness or different things. So they're quite interesting, but these are my favorite too at the minute. And um, I don't know if you watch any of the Home of the Year or anything, but like if you scale that up and stick it on a white wall, you're a posh house on RTE, like for sure. I think that it's a very interesting way of arriving at little abstract compositions. So spending time looking at what you've cut out is really good. It helps you uh, disrupt maybe your perception about what abstraction is, or so these will be, we're going to use these as little studies in week 4, which will be in April after your Easter holidays. So keep all those little circles. Oh, and before I move on from the circles, I often find too, if you had a piece of folded over card and you stuck one on, that could be a really nice little note card either. Um, quite a bespoke handmade card, which is always nice to receive. So I'm a big fan of the waste not, want not. Now, whether you get to this in this session or not, don't worry. I'm going to start using some of my scrap, my leftover pieces from this exercise. I'm going to cut the side off where it was attached into the journal so that I just have color. And I'm going to play around with the scrap. I might come up with another another design, but I'll move from stop share and stop my share and then just move down onto my notebook. So in the example here, I collage a circle using the scrap left over from the circle cutting exercise we've just done. And I'm going to stick it down with PVA glue. But it doesn't have to be a circle. It could be any shape you like. You could even, draw some flowers. You could combine with the oil pastel. And what else I have included on this over your Easter break, a little article, a web article on artist journals and artists whose diaries are just as inspiring as their art and finished pieces. I nearly always, there isn't a day that I don't listen to music, and I'm a big Spotify fan or for podcasts and playlists. So I do love to listen to music while I work because I find it adds to the experience as well. And I'm going to just flick on to the last slide session is, and that you can kind of send either to WhatsApp or by email if you have any queries or questions or anything. And this material is going to be available on the G Drive. So you can watch the recording or you can take the silent version and just flick through to the slides that you want to revisit. So there's plenty of flexibility there. So I'm going to stop my share and aim down at my my page and get my paint away and do a little something with my scrap. So I've all these nice colors left over. I ended up, when I did my shape last week, I had a sort of a trace image come through on this side of the of the page. So I might collage around that and do something. And that will be a way of keeping that ghost image and making it look a little more intentional. So I'm going to flip that around and show how I would use the collage and the scrap. So I kind of going to paste on some of the PVA. And if you're not a fan of the PVA because you think it's too sticky, you can always place it down with the with Pritt stick either. So I'm going to leave my ghost shape that came through from the other page. And I'll just paint some glue around most of it. And then I'm just going to rip bits and see what happens. Make a little pattern around it with my leftover scrap. And mightn't be for everybody, but I find a lot of this kind of work very meditative because I don't really have to think. And there's something quite therapeutic about ripping stuff up. And a lot of it's nearly like the paper is a palette of colors that have come from our exercise today. So I might just gradiate the color a little bit and put some of my blues together. So a bit like a mosaic. Any bits that stick up then. So this is where I'll stick down another layer of glue on top of that. Then once I have them placed, a bit like wallpapering. So see if I have any more bluey areas. I'm kind of maybe moving into green now, so I'll start ripping up a few of those. A lot about journaling is, I suppose, spending time with yourself creatively. It doesn't always have to have a planned intention. There can be elements of surprise. I'm just going to paint over this with a bit of glue to hold this lot down. It's kind of warm. The heat's been on today, so the glue is drying fast. You could always then use some, I may run out of colored scrap paper here, but you could always use some from your collection then if you had any left over. A lot of this work is very process based, and that means that, you know, sometimes it's not really about the outcome, but it's about maybe having an understanding or experimenting with color and techniques. And that can take a while to get used to. I know when we went to college first, I was like, why am I in the Phoenix Park with a ball of string and I can only make a sculpture with what I find in the park, like twigs and string? What's the point of that? And it's not really until you do it that you understand the point of it. It's making you resourceful. So I'm going to continue along with this. You can see that the colors are actually sitting quite nice together, even if they are ripped up pieces of paper. They harmonize quite well. So I will continue ripping and sticking and share my progress then in next week's gallery. So Barbara, I'm going to ask you to stop recording here.